Happy Maker Monday. Today is another Bloc demo. I didn't make a Bloc demo last month. I don't remember why. So we're making up for it today. Today we are going to talk about the Bloc Drunkard's Path ruler. We have talked about this before. I don't love making a curved piece, but there are some tools out there that make curved piecing a little less crazy making, and this is one of them. So I thought I could do this as a twofer. We're going to show you how the Drunkard's Path template works, and I'm going to show you a new kit that I am putting up for pre-sale that's going to be exclusive just to our store. So I'm going to tease you a little bit with that fabric. The fabric should be in probably sometime in January, so we'll have the kit ready then, but I did go ahead and put it on today's sale. So what we're going to make is this little element here. So I am making 4-inch finished Drunkard's Path pieces without pinning and with only a little bit of cursing. So, all right, so what we're making is this element right here, and we're going to make a whole bunch of them. So I'm going to first tease you a little bit with the fabric. So come on over. I've already cut up some of them, so you'll see those in the blocks, but this is a brand new line that's not even available yet by Anna Maria Horner that's called Fluent. It has a lot of florals, obviously, because that's how she works, but her heritage is Greek. So there is a lot of Greek elements in this because she's addressing the fact that she is fluent in multiple languages. I really like this fabric. I'm already a huge Anna Maria fan, but this one in particular is just gorgeous. So here's the fat quarter bundle that's going to come in your kit. I just got to get one, actually I got to get 2 early. I love these shocking pinks that are in here, but there's also some really beautiful blues. So we're going to flip through the fat quarter bundle a little bit and kind of show you off this fabric. Like I said, I've already cut up a few of the bundles, a few of the fabrics. I have the pieces of them left over here, but we're just going to flip through these for a second. Look at these big, gorgeous prints. This fabric here, I can't get enough of this fabric. This is one of those fabrics that I'm going to have a hard time cutting up. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to have a hard time at it. I believe this is the print that the wide back's going to come in. Look at these big, beautiful roses. She also made a kit called Trilingual, which is already available on our website. We already have it in the store that features all of these fabrics. Look at that shocking pink and orange combination. I love this sort of retro kind of Mod Squad print. There's one in here though. Here's that same print, but in a different colorway. I like the wide varieties of prints and these big, beautiful yellow roses. There's also a print in here, which I've already cut up, but I want to show it to you. These are the other prints that I've already gotten into. So making this quilt, you're going to have pretty much a whole fat 1/8 left over after you start cutting it up. So these are the colors that I've already started on. I love this fabric. So I cut the pink side off already, but if this doesn't read Greek, I don't know what does. So it's like, you know, Greek vases with like Olympian artwork on it. I absolutely love it. Here's another colorway of that big floral print. I love this stripe print. This comes in both a blue and a pink. So these are some of the fabrics that I've already started to chop up. I just wanted to show you the whole line. Like I said, if you make this project, you're going to have more than a whole fat 1/8 left over, which means you can just make the quilt bigger, or you have a whole nother section left over. So what I made the bundle for was this book here. This book is called By the Bundle. It's an Emma Jean Jansen book. I love her patterns. They're really easy to follow and really easy to read. But this is all made to make quilts with a fat quarter bundle that has at least 12 fat quarters in it. So I flipped through this book, and honestly, you could make almost every quilt in this book with this bundle. The one I chose to make is this one here called Half Moons. So what I did was I've already started making a lot of the Drunkard's Path, but I've actually put together this corner for you so you can see how it's going together. Again, the pattern gives you these sort of templates to lay out with that are on paper. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to use the pattern, and I'm going to cut out my pieces ahead of time, but I'm going to use the Bloc ruler to show you how to do that. Okay. So we're just going to pick this fat quarter bundle, or this fat quarter, and we're going to stash all the rest over here. I'm also using a peppered cotton for my background fabric. This one is called, what is it? Ashes of Roses, I think. So it's got sort of a taupey pink color one way and a really pale pink the other way. So it's a really neat in-depth color combination. And I think it looks beautiful with all these fabrics. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I prepped this to begin with. The pattern gives you options for how big to cut your pieces. It gives you the option to do, I think, 12 of each fat quarter. So I'm going to show you how I did that. So I have cut my background strip the size that the book calls for. But I'm going to cut my smaller strip, my secondary strip, just a little bit smaller than the pattern calls for. This is my template to make my, we'll call it the pie piece of our Drunkard's path. If I measure this against my regular ruler, it is 3 1/4 inches from here to here. So you can do this technique with any of the Bloc rulers if you just measure it ahead of time. So here's the end of my pie piece. It's 3 1/4 inches. And I'm going to throw things on the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off my fat quarter bundle, or my fat quarter, a 3 1/4 inch strip. I'm actually going to do 2 of these because that's going to give me enough pieces of fabric to do what I need to do. So I have folded it in half. I'm going to overcut my 3 1/4 inch piece just slightly, so that I can then trim it down. And I like doing it like this because it gives me a nice big chunk of the leftover fabric, so I can do bigger things with it later. This was from a previous demo. I don't need that. So let me take that off. All right. 3 1/4 inch strips. I've got 2 of them. So I'm just going to clean up this end. Now you'll notice I'm using a 28mm cutter. That is because this, we're going to cut a curved shape, and if you are cutting a curved shape, a smaller cutter is going to get around those corners easier. This is also a really good time for your rotating mat. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find where my shortest piece is, which is this one right here. Okay, so I didn't bother cutting my selvages off. This is my smallest section. So I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to take the straight side of my pie piece and make sure that I'm cutting off that shortest section. Okay, now I'm using my smaller rotary blade because I can get all the way around this curve if I use that smaller blade. Okay, so I'm going to cut the curve first, rotate my mat, and then clean up this edge. And this is why it's important to know where your shortest piece is, because now you know that you've got the right shape. Okay, so we're just going to cut as many as we can get from this piece, which I think I'm getting 12 repeats by using these 2 strips. But just leave it in place, make sure you get a nice smooth cut. Okay, so once I cut out all my pieces, actually, I guess I got 12 pieces out of this. And this rotating mat really makes it a lot easier. All right, so I'm going to cut out all of the pieces that I can out of those strips. And now I've got a stack. And you have very little waste this way. All right, so I'm going to stack these up. I'm going to add them to the rest of my stack. So I like to call this the pie piece because it's the inside of the crust. This is my crust piece. I know it's hard to see because it's clear plastic, but the shiny is good. This is the same size that the pattern calls for. I just didn't cut it into squares. In the pattern, she has you cut them into rectangles so you can cut 2 at a time. Instead, I'm going to stack mine up so I can cut 4 at a time. Same thing, I want to get rid of my selvage, and if I put my fold right there along my selvage, I can get rid of that all at once. Now you'll see that this piece is just a little bit bigger. It's a little bit taller than my template, but you'll see why in a second. So I can cut this shape. Again, I have that smaller rotary cutter so I can get around that curve really clean. Well, normally I can. And if I turn this around, I can cut all 4 sides of my template. And now I have my pie piece. Now this piece is bigger because I can turn it this way and waste very little fabric. So normally you would have to cut away that whole sort of middle center part. But by cutting my template just about a 1/4 inch bigger, I can go all the way around this shape and hardly waste any fabric at all. Okay, so I'm going to cut out all of these pieces. I can't remember how many pieces the pattern calls for, but you don't got to watch me cut all those. Okay, so I've got all of these stacked up. Now I'm going to show you 2 different ways to get here, and I'm going to show you which way I like better. If you have ever made a drunkard's path before, you have probably pinned the ever-living hell out of it to get it to line up. If you want to do that, I'll show you how that works. So I took my piece, I folded it in half, and I pressed a crease in it. I did that with both my crust piece and my pie piece. The reason I did that was now I can line these up. My middle, I can line up the 2 folded pieces, right? So there's my center. So you can pin it here. Then you want to take this whole piece and turn it so that that point of the curve lines up with the straight part of the crust. And I like to pin all the way along that side, because if you make sure that this side is lined up, then your curve comes out better. Then you have to line this side up too and make sure that's really straight. If I'm doing, and now this is only a 4-inch finished block, it's not a very big piece. If I'm going to do this though, I'm going to put 5 pins in, because now what happens is if I stretch these out, they kind of fall in place with each other. They kind of just go together like a cup. Okay, so those are going to line up. And I'm going to put about 5 pins in. Now I'm going to tell you why I don't love this method. 1, it's tedious. I get bored, and then I just don't go and finish it. I'm never going to finish this project if I have to put 5 pins in every single one of these curves before I go and sew it. I just don't have the attention span for it. The other thing that happens is, even if you're good, you pin folds down. See all these creases that are back here? You're never going to stitch this without stitching puckers in. And if you want case in point, I was demoing this on a different one. I can show you in that pile of finished ones I have over there, 2 of them have little pleats stitched into them. This makes me crazy. I don't want to do it. And all these pins are in the way. There's no way I'm getting through this without bleeding. In fact, I just stabbed myself in the thumb. So instead, I'm going to show you how I do it. So we're going to go over to the machine and we're going to stitch some of these. So instead, I'm going to take my single pin here. I've got a whole stack of my crust pieces and a whole stack of my pies. I've also got a whole bunch of these that I've already sewn on there today because I was playing while I was waiting for you guys. So I'm going to take 1 piece of my outside circle and 1 piece of my inside circle. Remember when I showed you to line up the side pieces straight? I'm still going to do that. I'm just only going to do it on the one side. So I'm going to use 1 pin to pin along this edge. I'm going to put my pin where it's out of the way and I don't have to take it out when I start sewing, because I don't like to do that. Okay. So we're going to go over to our machine. I have my 1/4 inch piecing foot on because y'all know how much I love my 1/4 inch piecing foot. I'm going to line this fabric up straight with each other. If you have a machine with pivot, this is a really good time to use it. If you don't have a machine with pivot, this is a good time to put your knee lift on. And if you don't have either of those things, call DJ. He'll get you a machine with pivot, because when you're doing this kind of technique, pivot changes everything. And if you don't know what that is, see how my needle is down in my fabric and I can turn my fabric? The needle is down, but the foot is up. That pivot feature changes everything. Okay. So I just put my needle down in one stitch. I'm going to take about 3 or 4 stitches. That's about 1/4 of an inch worth of sewing. And then I'm going to pull that pin out. Now, here's my thing. Here's the reason I like the Bloc lock. The piece is made slightly oversized, so you're going to trim this down. So this is not going to come out perfect, and that's okay. We don't like perfect here anyway. I'm going to take the bottom piece of my curve. I am not going to stretch it. I'm just going to move it so that it's somewhat straight. See how when I pull this out, this bottom piece goes mostly straight, but I'm not pulling on it. That part is really important. Don't pull on your bottom. I just have the pads of my fingers holding the bottom piece. I am going to pull on the top piece. I'm not going to yank on it or anything. I'm just going to give it enough of a tug to put some tension on it. But see how I'm not gripping the bottom fabric? I'm not gripping the bottom fabric on purpose because I have a hard time having 2 different tensions in my hands. My hands want to do the same thing. So I'm not going to hold my bottom piece like this. Just going to put the pads of my fingers on it and stretch it out straight. Then I am going to grab the top piece and I'm going to pull on it a little bit. Do you see how when I pull on it a little bit, it goes mostly straight? Okay, so since you have a concave and a convex shape, the tension on the top piece is going to make it go straighter. But I don't want tension on my bottom piece. Okay, so we're just going to hold the bottom, we're going to pull on the top, and those pieces are going to go straight. And I'm just going to sew. I sew maybe 1 inch or so at a time. This isn't that big of a curve. Like I said, this is only a 4-inch finished block. When I get to about here, it starts to get a little awkward to get those 2 pieces together. So let your pivot do its job and zhuzh everything around so that you get it mostly straight. Again, this is not going to fit all the way to the end, but it's still going to be okay. So we're just going to sew right off the end. I like to chain piece, so I'm going to chain piece as many of these as I can until I get bored, and then I'm going to move on to something else. Okay, so I've already sewn quite a few of them. They're hanging off the back here. So we're going to take all of this stack out of the machine and we're going to go over to the ironing board. All right, so I've got a whole chain here of Drunkard's path blocks. So I'm going to separate them all from each other. Now, my next tip when you're doing this, if you have not yet used a block lock ruler or a block lock trimmer, the biggest feature to them is that they lock onto the seam. So all block lock rulers have this 1/4 inch groove in them, whether they're straight or curved or otherwise. They all have this groove in there, and that's what locks onto things. That means it's very important that you press your fabric the right way, okay? In this case, we're going to press towards our pie piece. Now, if you look at this and you kind of just hold it and you pull on your block and you look at the back, look, it already wants to go that way anyway. It automatically wants to go that way. Because that convex curve is going to naturally flow that way, that makes it easy. So I'm going to set this down and I'm just going to press my block flat. I like steam when I'm doing this because steam makes the curves all lay flat. My other tip with this particular fabric, so if you're working with peppered cotton, I always use flatter before I start cutting my pieces up. Look at how nice and flat that it lays. Okay, so we're going to talk about this at the end as well. So all I did was put my steam on my iron, and when I lay this down and I go from my pie to my crust, it's going to automatically lay that way, and it's going to lay nice and flat. So, like I said, I do one thing at a time until I get bored, and then I move on to the next thing. Okay, so now a couple things you're going to notice. These aren't perfectly straight, right? Because when we got to the end, it wasn't necessarily full. But look how pretty our curve is. So with our nice pretty curve, we're going to go over to our rotating cutting mat again. The rotating cutting mat is really important in this particular step, and you'll see why. So we had our pie template and our crust template. Now we're using our trimming tool. So I'm going to take my tool and pop it onto that curve. So do you see how the groove fits right into that curve space right there? And it pushes that curve into a perfect arc. So see how when I rotate this, it holds on to that seam, but it turns that curve. So what you want to do with this is you want to get this locked onto your curve, and you want to make sure you know it's in the right place when you see fabric on all four sides to be cut away. So if you just pop this on and you're not really paying attention and it's sitting there like that, and you go to cut it, you're going to get a weird block. And if that's what you're going for, then this can be fun too. But if you want a nice square block, lock this groove on and then look to make sure that you have something to cut off on all four sides. And I do. But this is where your rotating mat comes in really handy, because you don't want to mess with this as you're cutting your four sides. So I'm going to cut a side, turn it, cut it, turn it, cut it, turn it, and then cut that last piece. Okay? So what we've got is some really pretty quilter spaghetti and a really nice, perfect Drunkard's path block. Okay? So I'll show you that one more time. And it really doesn't matter. I've made probably, I don't know, 5 dozen of these so far, and I've only had one that when I came over to the trimmer, I just couldn't trim it down because there wasn't quite enough fabric to cut off all the sides. So I wanted to show you this one on purpose. See, we're kind of way off right here. But when I put my trimming tool down on it and I lock it in, I have fabric to cut off all four sides. So this is going to work. So if I trim these two sides, and trim these two sides, look at how pretty that is. It's all nice and clean. It's going to go together really nicely with my other blocks. And then I'm going to show you how these go together. So when we go to put these with each other, that's going to make a half circle. So my next tip is when you go to put the blocks together for this particular quilt, I would match up these two seams. Is that zooming? There you go. I would match up those two seams right there. And if you do that, when you go to sew this, you're going to end up with a perfect half circle. And I'm going to show you what some of those look like. Okay? So see, here's my half circles and my solid pieces. So when you look at the quilt pattern, this is the top left-hand corner. A couple things I want to point out. I was very intentional about my pressing so that when you look at the back of this, everything lays nice and flat. So even though you have some places where the seams have multiple layers, everything lays really flat because I am always extremely intentional with my pressing so that everything will go together like this. So this is the beginnings of my quilt. I hope to work on this quilt for the rest of the week so that we have the sample ready for you when the fabric shows up. But like I said, you can pre-order this kit. Look at how pretty all those colors go together. And I love how this background looks a little bit gray and a little bit pink and a little bit brown. It's very neutral. All right, so let's talk about the stuff we used on today's video. So the first thing that we talked about is the quilt kit that I'm making up for you guys. So let me tell you a little bit about this quilt kit. The kit is going to come with the fabric only. So it will come with a fat quarter bundle, this color background fabric, and binding. I'm not putting the book in the kit because maybe you already have the book, and the book does change the price quite a bit because, well, it's a book. So the book is not going to come in the kit because if you already have this book, you don't need the book. You just need the kit, right? So when you go onto our website, you'll see the kit, and then I'll make sure that I put an attachment to this book so you know it's the right book, okay? So the first thing we have is the kit, which is the fabric, the backing fabric, and the binding, not the backing. This is the book. This is the Buy the Bundle book. I have shown you this book before, mostly because I absolutely love this quilt. I love this quilt. At some point in the near future, I'm going to show you some tricks on making this quilt as well, because I really do love every quilt in this book. So there's the book, there's the fabric kit. If you want to make this quilt, you need the 4x4 Drunkard's Path by Bloc. Let me show you all of the different sizes that the Drunkard's Path comes in. So in this video for this project, we are using the 4-inch Drunkard's Path tool. It also comes though as a 3-inch block. So depending on what your pattern calls for, or if you want to, since I showed you how to do the measurements, if you want to make the quilt that's in this book but smaller, you could just make smaller Drunkard's Path. On the same note, you could also make them bigger. So this is a 6-inch Drunkard's Path. It comes 3, 4, 6, and 8-inch. This is a more traditional size for Drunkard's Path because back in the day they used to make a lot of these and they were just a little bit bigger. So this is an 8-inch one. So they come in 4 sizes depending on what size your pattern calls for and depending on what you want to do.
Collect the whole set.
Collect the whole set. I also wanted to introduce you guys to a new scent of flatter. Y'all know I love me some flatter. This is a new smell called Wild Mint. It's very refreshing. It smells a little bit like a florist shop. You know how when you walk into a florist shop, they all smell the same, doesn't matter what they are, and you're not sure which flower it is? In my opinion, I think it's the greenery that mixes together, but that's kind of what this one smells like. It's very refreshing. I really like it. It's real clean smelling. But this is their newest scent. It's called Wild Mint, so I thought I would show you that today. I also showed you the 28 millimeter cutter. So the cutter as well as the replacement blades are on this this sale today too. I also went ahead and threw in the grid wall because a couple people have asked me about my my design wall. It is a flannel gridded, specifically designed for grid wall by K Facet. It's what he uses in all of his classes. I absolutely love it. So when I use it in my videos, I'm hanging blocks to it without pinning them at all, and they really do stick. So in the sale, it's sold by the half-yard increment because it's 44 inches wide, and then you can get however much you need to cover the space that you have. I hope you guys are inspired to do some Drunkard's Path, and I really hope you're as excited about this kit as I am. I can't wait for this quilt to come together. So I will see you guys later. Bye.